is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The High Lord by Trudy Canavan, brought to you by Ashley. In these chapters, Sonea learns a new skill, and I am really concerned about her being truth-read by somebody else. Also, Daniel is dealing with some shit, and I feel like it has to tie in with everything, but I don't know how. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. And yeah, so this was a confusing episode for me in that I covered the first two sections, I think, covered in total chapters 1 through 8, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm looking this up right now because part of the confusion for me with knowing exactly how far to read is the fact that for every platform that I read Kindle books on, my Mac, my actual Kindle, and my phone all have different formats for showing me where I am. So some of them include page counts. Some of them do not include page counts. And I have to sort of hold in my mind exactly where I was the last time I was finished reading. So this section, I think I might have read a little bit too far, but the thing is that I realized that chapter 7 begins at page 99, according to my Kindle on my phone. This is probably really uninteresting to all of you, and so I believe that chapter 10 was where I had left off. I miscounted. So I think I read too far this time is what I'm saying. And I'm going to have a lot to cover, but bear with me. And my apologies to Ashley for getting this wrong. I know that it can be hard for people commissioning because in Ashley's case, she doesn't have a copy of the book. And even if you do, if it's a print copy, it won't necessarily be helpful to telling me where to stop in a Kindle. So anyway, let's start with the decision that Sonea makes that she is going to learn black magic. It is, I think, really surprising that Akkarin doesn't expect her to ask to learn this after everything that he has told her. He looks pretty shocked that she would even ask and says, I told you that I am not going to agree to teach you this, that was part of the deal. But I mean, he has to know that she's going to feel this threat to her country really keenly. And not only the threat to her country, but as she says later, her family lives in the slums where people are being killed. There's a massacre later on in this section. So it's a very real danger to people that she loves and cares about. And he just seems that she would be willing to be passive about this. And it just goes to show that he doesn't really understand her yet. He doesn't really know her at all. So yeah, the whole thing is just really, for me, a foregone conclusion that of course she is going to learn this, but he has to overcome a lot of internal struggle to agree to this. The whole and the fact that she is learning now, as he says, is going to be something that is in her mind and leads to her never being able to be truth read by anybody, because a piece of this truth, this training that she has undergone, may leak out. And that's a pretty big deal to me. Basically what she's chosen to do is drastic enough that no truth read will ever be possible again. And I don't know about you, but considering how Sonea has already kind of gone up against somebody who was considered more reliable than she was in terms of her coming from the slums and him being a noble that people would have trusted his word, and the truth read was the only thing that got her out of it, I find it really frustrating that she's going to be put in a position where that sort of advantage is not going to be available anymore. She will have to rely on the trust that she has built up with people at school in a normal way versus being able to depend on a basically foolproof system. So for those who are curious, the section that I read here, I read chapters 8 through 12, I believe. So yeah, I started at chapter 120 and ended at 200. So I read almost 80 pages. So I went too far, but, and Rothen is just, I really enjoy the fact that he's worried about Sonea, that he is watching her and questioning her and making sure that the change he sees in her demeanor is not something that he needs to worry about. Of course, he's worried anyway. Martin says she could just say, I only want Akkarin to read my mind. I guess she could, but I don't know. I guess that's an option. I just don't know how people would react or if that would be something that would draw suspicion because she's his favorite, as they say. And I feel like people would think, well, if she doesn't want anybody else to see, then maybe she's covering for him or she's relying on him to give her special treatment. But maybe that would work out fine. Maybe nobody would think anything of it because they trust Akkarin. So yeah, Rothen goes up to her finally later and is just like, hey, I have noticed that you have been a little different and I just want to make sure that everything is, that you're not being asked to do anything that you don't want to do. And when she says no, she has a look on her face that he remembers from when she has quasi lied in the past. This smile that she gets when she's telling some of the truth, but not the whole truth. And he then rephrases the question, which is really smart of him, and says, are you doing anything that I would not approve of? To which she still says no. And I like that because, of course, if she told him, oh, I'm learning black magic, he would disapprove of that. But if you frame it as, I am learning to protect Kyralia, that is something he would definitely approve of. And that's what I think she's done in her head. So she has figured out a way to answer his question, quote, honestly, while still obfuscating a little bit and giving him enough of a hint that she's keeping something from him, that he's still worried. But she's able to act naturally enough with him still that it seems that she has put most of his concerns to rest. I won't say all of them. So their interactions, it's one of those things that reminds me of going back to the beginning of Song of Ice and Fire and reading about the Stark family, all living together, all alive, all, functioning as a unit, a house together. You have this oh my God, this is so sweet. And they have no idea. And that's what I'm having a little bit with Rothen and Sonea is I yearn a little bit for the early days where it was the two of them against the world and they had each other's backs implicitly. And she was able to tell him everything. And he was in her head all the time for lessons. And even though she was resistant at first, she grew to really trust him. And them not being entirely on the same side now just breaks my heart a little bit. And I think they're both handling it as best they can. I don't think either one of them has done something that I am looking at thinking you've made a mistake there. But because of circumstances, they can't be friends the way that they were. And that's a shame, So, all right, let's go talk to Daniel. Let's go talk to him about this rogue magician that he's dealing with. This whole thing is a mess. So Daniel, first of all, I'm going to read this speech from this guy. It's time of us to talk of the business that has brought us here. We have come together because of a common loss, the loss of opportunity. Some of us were offered this opportunity and were forced by circumstances to turn it down. Others were never offered that choice or were given it, then had it taken away. Still more wish for an opportunity that does not require being shackled to an institution whose principles they do not agree with, based in a country they do not belong to. We all know the opportunity I speak of, the opportunity to learn magic. For the last 2 centuries, the only legal way a man or woman could learn magic was to join the guild. For us to learn to use magic outside of the guild's influence, we must break the law. Ambassador Daniel has complied with this law, but he too laments the loss of opportunity. His companion Tyen of Tremolin has magical talent. Ambassador Daniel wishes to teach him how to protect or heal himself. A reasonable, no, an honorable wish. What will you give us in exchange for protecting your friend? And Daniel says, I can offer you the opportunity you have lost. I can teach you a little magic. A little? Yes, there are some things I will not teach you, and some things I cannot teach you. Such as, I would not teach the offensive warrior skills to anyone I did not trust. They are dangerous in the wrong hands. And I am an alchemist, so my knowledge of healing is limited to the basics. And I must be sure that you are able to protect Tyen before I teach you anything. So here comes an interesting sort of question, because later on this guy frames this whole thing as we are not allowed to practice magic unless we're part of the guild. And Daniel corrects him and is like, no. You are not allowed to learn magic outside of the guild. There is a difference. And there are people with magical talent who, when they are in Kyralia, are given the choice, or their families are given the choice on whether or not they are going to practice and join the guild at all, because they may not want to. Their family may not want them to, and I'm not sure how I feel about Daniel making that distinction, because from what I understand, if you have magical talent, but you decide not to use it, it's smothered, right? Or you are one of the people for whom magic has been revealed in your system, for lack of a better phrase, but nobody has released it yet. Because keep in mind, Sonea's sudden access to her power is really rare. Most of the people who have learned magic have done so via coming in contact with a magician who already suspects that they have some kind of power, and that magician reaching into their power and like tapping it open and releasing it. So I'm like, cases like this where somebody has magic that has been sort of released by accident, there isn't, like, all we've seen is the way that they like took possession of Sonea because she was dangerous, and then gave her the choice whether to join the guild or have her magic smothered. And I feel like that's a pretty fine distinction that I don't know really matters. Martin in the comments is saying, if I recall, it's briefly mentioned that some older children of nobles have certain small-scale talents that they can access without being trained, like listening to mind reading. Okay. And I guess for them, that isn't smothered because it's not a hazard to them, like Sonea was to everyone. But obviously, this person that is in question in these chapters that Daniel winds up helping out, and I say helping out in parentheses or in quotation marks because I think he is helping him, but I'm sure the young man would have a different perspective on this. It's a whole other thing. It's a similar thing to Sonea, where he's like blowing shit up by accident, lighting things on fire. This is destructive, dangerous. And the fact that they like are unwilling to let this guy, I mean, we find out later that there is a reason that he's not being allowed to join the guild. And that is something that like Daniel is the only one who gets in on that secret on why exactly he isn't being allowed. And I can't help but think that the king here, because what it turns out to be is this kid has learned how to access conversations that magicians have via mind communication without intending to. And he is able to mind read a lot more easily. And he witnesses, I think, and forgive me because I'm forgetting exactly how this happened, but he witnesses the king murder somebody, and the king knows that he will have to be mind read if he enters the guild, and then the king's treachery will become common knowledge. So the king won't let him join the guild because of the fact that he could give his secret away. But the king doesn't seem to appreciate how inherently suspicious it is to have someone capable of magic of the scale this kid obviously is capable of when he can light things on fire by accident and not allow him to join the guild. Like, that's sending up all kinds of alarm bells and is like, basically, I know that this is like the king is doing what he can to not get caught. I get this, but it comes down to a fundamental truth in my mind that I want to be true, but I know is not necessarily. And that is, if you do some shit and enough people know, it is going to come out whether you like it or not. It is a matter of time. Of course, the king can't take that point of view on it. But not allowing this kid to join the guild and keeping him alive is a really dumb move if he wants to cover his tracks completely. But he's trying to use this kid instead. He is trying to take advantage of how this young man has the skills to, you know, he wants to have his cake and eat it too, basically. And you can't. King, you need to either kill the guy and get rid of the last witness of what you did, or you need to, like, either accept the risk or, I don't know, let your palace be burned down. Like, he's just not thinking things through because he's obviously kind of a bad man. Martin says he can't kill him. His magic will explode. Well, his shit is going to explode anyway, evidently. So, like, you know, have somebody drag him out into the wilderness and let his magic explode then. And, you know, like, figure out a way. But that's me thinking like Tywin Lannister instead of trying to be like, you know, worried about this kid's safety like I probably should. So I'm going to move on from that. So yeah, when Daniel meets this kid and he says like that, I'm going to read your mind. His name, by the way, is Ferrand. Ferrand kind of freaks out and is just like, oh, I'm going to be like this forever because nobody can mind read me. And Daniel has to assure him that there are ways for him to hide things. But even so, Daniel is able to sort of wiggle in there and figure out parts of his secret. It's initially hidden enough, but as he continues to teach him, more and more is revealed until the whole scope of what happened is accessible to Daniel. So let's see. I'm going to find this part. Here it is. Okay. Ferrand seemed relieved to be able to tell someone his secret. He showed Daniel his memories of hearing mental conversations as he grew out of childhood. This was unusual, but not unheard of in those with magical potential. Ferrand was tested for ability, told he could apply to join the guild when he was older. In the meantime, the Aline king learned of his ability to eavesdrop on magicians' mental conversations, and Ferrand was summoned to court, where he kept the king informed of what he overheard. One day, however, Ferrand accidentally witnessed the king making an agreement with one of the powerful Dems to have the Dems' political rival murdered, and upon realizing this, the king extracted an oath of silence from him. Later, when Ferrand had applied to join the guild, he was refused. He did not discover until later that the king knew the secret agreement would be revealed during mind-reading lessons and therefore prevented him from becoming a magician. It was an unfortunate situation and one which had shattered Ferrand's dreams. Now Daniel felt genuine sympathy for him. Now that the secret had been told, Ferrand was not as distracted. He found his source of power easily. After a few attempts to show Ferrand how to influence it, Daniel left the man's mind room and opened his eyes. Martin is saying maybe that's why the Chamber of Punishment was secret, because of a political nature. It can be used to execute them, which they currently can't. That's an interesting thought, because it's sort of a similar thing, like those of you who read the Dresden Files. In that universe, wizards have something called a death curse, which is basically using all of the power behind their, all of the energy remaining in their body to lay one last magical working down before they are killed. And that is something that they will do if nobody is restraining their magic at the time of their death and they see the death coming. That's the key. Like, if somebody were to sneak up on you, you can't lay a death, you're dead before you know what's happening. But if you are not instantly killed, and if you are not in a situation where somebody has like running water pouring over your head, or a certain type of manacle on your wrist, which suppresses magic, then you are able to lay a pretty devastating blow of magic that you might not otherwise have been capable of in your life down on somebody using the vestiges of all of your magic in your body. So that is part of why people are worried about killing wizards in the Dresden verse, because you have to be able to be really sneaky about it, or else you are going to be on the receiving end of some bad shit. And they have found workarounds for suppressing magic in order to be able to do this. And this Chamber of Punishment does seem like the only thing I've ever heard of where a magician is able to be, like, I don't want to say snuck up on, because obviously if you're being brought down there, you know what's about to happen, I would imagine. But laid so low, and you've used up so much of your magic trying to defend yourself from the blows, that I don't know if you still have that explosion when you die or what. I'm curious about how that works. Like, if there's, we've seen magic in this world treated as sort of a well that you need to refill. It is used up, and you need to refill it with either the strength of someone else using black magic, just simple rest, healing from someone else, that kind of thing. If a magician were to use up all of his magic trying to defend himself from the strikes in that cavern, would there be enough left to cause an explosion when they died? And even if there were, is that cavern built to cope with that? Maybe that explosion would not cause any damage all the way down there. Maybe there have been reinforcements placed on the place so that an explosion of magical talent that resulted from someone's death is absorbed and turned into a source of power for the cavern, which would be really interesting, sort of recycling it. But it's not obviously being used right now. This is something that nobody apparently knows is there except for Akkarin, and he asks Daniel not to tell anyone, which makes me think that Akkarin has plans for this, but I don't know what that is, because I don't feel like he's going to be able to just drag a bunch of Ichari, is that the name again, over there and just like throw them in there. So I'm curious about everything around that. Ichani, thank you. Oh, Lee's here. Hi, Ashley. So yeah, I'm really curious about the way that this is going to go down, because this poor fucking Ferrand is in a similar situation to Sonea, in that he doesn't think he can be part of the guild because of, in Sonea's case, she felt like she was betraying the people that she trusted and joining up with a crew that was oppressing her. And in this case, the guy is like literally being oppressed and threatened. by the most extreme power that I can think of, which is the king. And like the poor kid, to jump ahead a little bit, Daniel, his responsibility is to bring in a rogue who is learning magic on his own outside of things. And he obviously feels really bad for this kid and can see like the circumstances surrounding all of this they're just like, it's very understandable. But he also has a responsibility to uphold his duty in taking in somebody that has this potential before they hurt anyone. And also, Daniel rightfully thinks that the Dem has other plans for this kid and is not interested in just letting him learn magic for the sake of it because he has the right. He's interested in making some kind of political move of his own. And that is a whole other kettle of fish. And I'm not sure that Ferran knows this. It appears that his sister does seem aware of this. She seems to know exactly what the fuck the deal is. Like, she is no fool, but she can't really do or say anything about it. I'm not sure that Ferran is aware of how much of a pawn he is here, that nobody's really concerned about his safety. They are concerned about containing and training somebody who can be useful to them. So yeah, I'm just really like feeling for this kid, to be honest. And I'm feeling for Daniel as well, because like Daniel is in this terrible position here. He finds out about the black magic being in these books that Akkarin was studying. So he's simultaneously trying to deal with this poor kid. And he's also like realizing that Akkarin, whom he is, he's functioning directly under Akkarin's orders, was likely studying black magic. And Daniel has such a visceral reaction to this that even reading a book that gives him information that he thought he was seeking all along is technically breaking the law. Like, he is really having a strong reaction. Let's see. Ashley says, if anyone's keeping count, this sister is only the third woman, all of whom are Eileen, whose name doesn't end in A. I had been noticing that myself, Ashley. A lot of the men's names end with N as well. We've got Lorlen, Akkarin, Daniel, Rothen. They all, like, the men's names end in N, and I don't know if there's a significance to that or not. Martin says, so what do you think happens if the kid gets arrested by Daniel? Well, I read far enough to know that he gets fucking poisoned. And I feel really bad because Daniel is so certain that taking this kid into custody, I know his secret now, and the king isn't going to risk trying to kill me. And then this kid almost dies on the journey. Daniel, you are really underestimating what this guy is willing to do. He's like, I'm too strong for him to come at me. If you had been in a location where there wasn't another magician available, or if you weren't like, if you yourself had been poisoned, you might not have been able to save yourself, guy. So Daniel, I feel like, is being pretty cavalier and arrogant about how much he can handle and how much he can depend on the fact of his power being intimidating to keep him safe. And he might be overestimating himself there. The king does not seem to really give a shit. Like, he wants to preserve his power. And there comes a point where if somebody is frightened enough, they will do anything to keep things the way they are. Because, people like power. You just get accustomed to it. And Lord knows, if he was outed as being a murderer and they were able to definitively prove it, he might be killed. I don't know how they handle things. Like, I don't know if they execute the king for murder or if he's like outside of the arm of the law, but I would expect that he's not outside of it because he seems nervous enough about it. So anyway, yeah, that whole thing with Daniel, and he is able to tap into Venara mentally and ask her for her help in healing this kid and get it to a point where at the very least, Ferrand is not going to die, but he is fucked up. Like, really badly damaged from this. And the amount of healing that he's going to have to undergo is substantial. And I really feel bad because this is all like, this kid didn't want to know this. You know, it sounds like he accidentally overheard something. It wasn't like he was poking around in the king's private emails. You know, he wasn't fucking looking for information. And now he's getting a comeuppance for like putting his nose where it doesn't fucking belong. This was purely accidental, and it just like wound up being this huge life-changing thing. And I just can't help but wonder how many people have found themselves in similar situations to this in real life, where they just stumbled on something that they did not want to know and did not need to know, and wound up being killed because of it. And Jesus Christ, you know, like that fucking blows. So all right, I'm going to go back to Sonea. Well, first let me talk about Sari. Because Sari goes and talks to Akkarin about the fact that Akkarin has let Sonea in on this whole thing. I appreciate that Sari is going to be that confrontational and that he has the nerve to do that. And he tells them that there is another murderer out there, he thinks, that's a woman. And this results in this whole other thing going down, which I will get to in a second. But I like that Sari is like kind of struggling between still caring about Sonea and being into this other woman, Sonora, I think is her name. And I really like the fact that Sari is starting to sort of like dig into this thieves lifestyle because it's fascinating to read about. If Sari were too good-hearted and too like afraid of getting his hands dirty, basically, you know, you really run the risk of making your character too boring and good, like goody two shoes for me to give a shit about. It's sort of like, I've been rewatching True Blood, and the books, it's a whole other story, but in the show, they make Bill so reticent to embrace being a vampire that he is a fucking snore. And every time he's on screen, you're just like, oh, whatever, because he just has to, you know, constantly have crises of faith and conscience, and it's just dull. So the fact that she's not doing that with Sari, that Sari is pulling some underhanded shit, Sari is out there murdering people, and, you know, he has his code that he lives by, but he's not willing to pull punches. I'm like, all right, I can get behind this. Thank you, Sari. And all right, now that I'm talking about him, there's no real way to discuss what happened because later on, Sonea has decided that she is going to learn black magic. Akkarin is like, no, I'm not going to teach you that. And, Takan is like, you really should teach her. And Akkarin is taken by surprise, but Takan is like, look, somebody else needs to know what's going on and needs to know how to defend properly. They need to know what we're up against. And if she is aware of the risks, if she's aware of the strength of our enemy and you haven't given her the tools to fight back, that's kind of bullshit. And I think he's right. It just kind of comes down to like, you expected her to simply be a source of power for yourself. You wanted her to be a battery, but to not be a full person that you could like depend on and trust in and teach. And that's bullshit, Akkarin. That's trash. And she's better than that. And so is Takan, although apparently he is okay with basically being a battery because he does not want any part of this, it seems like. Because when Sonea finally learns how to do this and taps into Takan, she realizes that he's got as much power as she does. Like, he is very, very strong, but there is some kind of distance between him and his power. Like, he's not interested in tapping into this himself. So yeah, Sonea, like, she hears Takan being like a little panicked, and she goes into Akkarin's bedroom, which she has never been in before, and she expected to be like much more foreboding, but it's super ordinary and uninteresting. And she sees that Akkarin has like a big old slice down his arm, and apparently he got in a fight with somebody, a woman, who I thought at this point was like Ceri's ally. But it turns out that there is a woman assassin who I think is the person responsible for murdering 14 fucking people. So she did a lot, and she was very strong. And Akkarin went up against her and nearly lost. He won in that he escaped alive, but he did not beat her, and she is still out there. And I am wondering if there's going to be another massacre now that they have fought and she has drained her power supply by going up against him. Like, is she going to have to go and kill another 14 people? The city is only so big. How many times can she pull something like this and still get away with it? The scale of that, it is escalating very quickly. And I'm really curious if Ceri's ally is going to be able to take care of this the way that she says. She seems to have some skills at her disposal. And when she and Ceri talk, he kind of asks her, like, why is she so confident that she could take this person on? And she's just like, it's not really any of your business, but trust me, I know I can. And I'm just like, why though? Why? How do you know? What is it? So that's like poor fucking Lorlen. Oh, I feel so bad for Lorlen because he's still being watched by Akkarin. He's wearing that fucking ring. He still has to go and deal with these crime scenes, but remains convinced that Akkarin is somehow involved. I'm not sure if Lorlen still thinks that Akkarin is like the murderer. I don't think he believes that, but it doesn't look good. It's just, Lorlen is living in this constant state of being surveilled and completely vulnerable, and he has no idea what's happening. And I feel like it's time for Akkarin to bring him in and talk to him about this, frankly. I think he should do that by now. I think it's understandable why he didn't before, but Akkarin is, he has the capacity to show everybody, or at least show Lorlen and Rothen, what he has shown Sonea. And he isn't doing it. I guess he's worried that if they are constantly connecting with other magicians mentally, that maybe they will let shit slip. And he's not willing to like have this crisis be out there for everybody to know about. But it's just reaching this point that I feel like it's not sustainable keeping the secret anymore. So yeah, Lorlen being like brought in to look at this crime scene in which Akkarin was definitely involved in some way. Like, there's no way that's not going to be apparent. And it's going to look like he was the murderer, but he wasn't. He was fighting the murderer. Like, the whole thing. Poor Lorlen. He's in a worse position than Rothen by far. Rothen's completely in the dark, but he isn't being watched. At least he's got his privacy. And Lorlen is just being used. And I understand where Akkarin's coming from deciding to handle it this way. But like, you've convinced Sonea enough that she's willing to go against everything she ever thought she would be willing to do by learning this magic. Maybe have some faith in your friend Lorlen, who's got a good heart and understands the scope of things enough that I think you telling him the entire country could go down in flames if he doesn't help, I think he'd believe. But anyway, okay, so let's talk about Akkarin teaching Sonea black magic. First of all, like I said, Takan has to kind of step up and be like, you really need to teach her. I can be a volunteer. And I love the fact that, like, when Sonea learns it and she's like, well, that really wasn't that hard. And I hope I never have to use it, because if I have to use it, it's going to be because you're dead. And I only recently stopped wishing that that would happen. And I loved that line, and I love the fact that Akkarin and Takan both laughed, because things have really done a 180 in this department. Like, I don't think if you told Sonea a month ago that she would be hanging out with Akkarin and his servant using black magic and giggling, that she would fucking be receptive to that at all. And yeah, Akkarin says, I will reconsider if they attack Kyralia. By then it will be too late, Takan replied. They will not attack until they have removed you. He's right, Sonea interjected, her voice trembling. Teach me and use me as a source. I will not use black magic unless I have no other choice. He stared at her coldly. Do you know what the punishment is for learning and using black magic? She hesitated, then shook her head. Execution. No other crime earns such a punishment. Just seeking to learn about black magic will have you expelled from the guild. But you can make yourself useful to me without committing a crime. There's no law against giving power to another magician. Indeed, you have already been taught in warrior skills classes. The only difference is that I can store the power you give. A night's sleep was all you needed to recover most of your strength after facing Rothen and his followers. We should take care that you do not give too much power if you must tackle warrior skills classes the next day, however. And if you do intend to be capable of fighting these spies in my place, then I should take a hand in your training. Are you sure you want to do this? So, yeah. They do this. He takes a little bit of her power, leaves her enough energy for warrior skills class, and the warrior skills class is pretty fun, where she like puts up a shield, a bubble shield that's actually visible instead of the usual invisible one. And that obscures her from their sight. But she also can't see them. And then she makes a bunch of identical bubbles and like walks around each one, and they can't tell exactly where she is, so they don't know where to attack. And then she sneak attacks them from a spot that they didn't even realize she was standing. So I thought that was a pretty fun little thing, and a nice way to like use her mind and strategy instead of just raw power, which doesn't seem to really impress teachers at all in the end. Okay. So then we have Rothen noticing that she smiles at Akkarin and this whole thing. And Daniel being revealed that he is planning to betray them and arrest this kid after listening in on his voice. He's like just about taught this kid control finally. And Ferran is able to reciprocate and read Daniel's mind enough to tell that Daniel is going to betray them. It's a little bit delayed because Daniel has been taken somewhere to see this kid that he was, they put a bag over his head, I think, or something. They blindfolded him. So he doesn't even know where he is. And I wondered if they would take advantage of that and do something to him. But he is in custody of Ferran later on. So apparently it worked out. But yeah, I really feel like, I feel for Daniel in this situation. I feel for Ferran, like everybody. It's just whoever is in power in all of these different situations is really making life hell for people who don't have any. I guess it's a tale as old as time. So let's see. Oh yeah. So then we have Akkarin being injured. This is not the only difference between her and the previous spies. She's unusually strong for a former slave. She has not been here long and could not have grown so strong by killing Imardians. We would have heard if she had killed people. They prepared her, Takan suggested. His hands gripped the stained cloth tightly. Let her take strength from their slaves before she left? Perhaps. Whatever the reason, she was ready for the fight. She let me think she was exhausted. Then when I came close, she cut me. She wasn't quick enough to get a hold on my wound and draw power, however. After that, she tried to draw attention to our fighting. So you let her escape. Yes, she must have thought I'd let her go rather than endanger the lives of others. Or she knows you'd rather the guild didn't hear of magical battles in the slums. She will be killing to strengthen herself again. So, okay, I had it that she had, like, there was this massacre of 14 people before she attacked, but from the timing of it, I guess that was to build her strength back up again after this confrontation. And Takan says, this sounds wrong to me. She's too different. A woman? No Echani would free a woman slave. And she's strong, cunning, not like a slave at all. Akkarin regarded his servant closely. You think she's an Echani? Possibly. You should prepare as if she was. He glanced at Sonea. You should take an ally. Sonea blinked at the servant in surprise. Did he mean she should go with Akkarin when he faced this woman again? Yeah, so how about that? Savara, that is the name of the woman who is loosely allying with Sari. She's allying with him in that she's like willing to do something that ends up profiting him, but she's not showing her hand at all on that. So yeah, Sonea learns how to take power from Takan, and it's actually a lot easier than she expected. And she has to step into the center of her power in order to do this, which she wasn't taught by Rothen. And she's like, this feels amazing. Why didn't he teach me this? And Akkarin's like, you'll soon see. And I'm not sure what he meant by that, because does stepping into your power mean that you're doing black magic inherently? Is there not a way to step into your power directly and do something else with it? Like, I'm just curious about exactly what he meant by that. If that's dangerous to do often, but it doesn't sound like he thinks it's dangerous, because she's like, well, what if it burns me? And he's like, it won't. It's your power. It can't hurt you. But yeah, the way that this goes down, oh yeah, here it is. See? I see. It's wonderful. Why didn't Rothen teach me this? You will know why soon. I want you to expand yourself. Reach out and feel all of the power that is yours. Visualization is a useful tool, but you need to go beyond it now. We need to know your power. You need to know your power with all your senses. At first she worried that she was becoming conscious of the physical, that becoming conscious of the physical meant she was losing her concentration. Then the realization came that her power was her body. It didn't exist in some abyss within her mind. It flowed through every limb and bone and vein within her. Yes, now focus on your right hand and what lies beyond. She did not see it at first, then something caught her attention. It was a gap, a glimpse of something beyond herself. Focusing on it, she sensed that an otherness lay beyond. So maybe that's what he means, is that stepping into your power makes you too aware of the power not being in a little well in some recess of your body, that it's all of you, and that like leads to black magic sort of. But whatever it is, she winds up being able to manage it. And he ends, let's see. Oh yeah. He ends it basically like, okay, so now you know how to do it, and let's hope that you never, ever, ever have to. And the next day is when she runs into Rothen, and he has to be like, so what's going on? And she has her warrior class where she does her thing and like takes everybody out, and Balkan seems pretty impressed with her. And yeah, then we have Lorlen hearing about the murders and going and dealing with that. We don't actually see the crime scene in this section. He just decides that he's going to go off with the lieutenant, is it? Or sergeant? And then we go over to Daniel, who has to like help save this poor kid who's dying. And I'm going to read this last part. It took a great toll on Ferran's body. Healing magic could not replace the nutrients he needed to make blood and tissue. Reserves of fat and some muscle tissue were depleted. When he woke, if he woke, Ferran would be barely strong enough to breathe. When Daniel had done all he could, he opened his eyes, and as he became aware of the room again, realized that someone was hammering on the door. "Do you know who did this?" Minara asked. "No, but I have an idea why. I could investigate." "Let the others investigate. You must stay and guard the patient." "I don't trust them." There, it had been said. "Nevertheless, Ferrand is your responsibility. You can't protect him and look for the poisoner at the same time. Be vigilant, Daniel." She was right, of course. Rising from the bed, Daniel straightened his shoulders and readied himself to face whoever was knocking at the door. And that is where I finished. So yeah, this has been a very eventful section. I'm sorry that I read a little bit ahead of where I was supposed to, but hashtag no regrets. So yeah, and I'm just really like, I figure Lorlen has to be let in on this secret, but I'm not exactly sure if it's going to be accidental, on purpose, if he will be in a position by the time he learns the secret where he's even receptive to like hearing it and the explanation behind it, or if he will be so suspicious of Akkarin by then that he doesn't, that he puts up walls about it. I don't know. So I'll be interested to see how that all goes down. And the change in Sonea's demeanor can't have gone unnoticed by Lorlen, but we don't really spend much time in his POV to like hear the way that he's thinking of it, the way that we do with Rothen. He's a little distracted by the massacre, to be fair. He's got some shit on his mind. So, yeah, he can be excused. But I'm very concerned about him and this kid Ferrand, what he knows about the king and the arrangement the king made where he was murdering somebody. I can't help but think that is linked to the overall story. I can't imagine that it has nothing to do with anything, but I don't know how it's linked at all. I have no idea. Maybe he is the one that's sending people to kill Akkarin, for all I know. There's a lot that could be going on here. And I just feel like we're just opening this door. So yeah, I feel like, I said that there was like so much to talk about, but I feel like so much of it is, Sonea grappling with whether or not learning black magic is okay, that it winds up being sort of, boiled down in the end. Martin says, you say link to the overall story. What do you think the overall story is? Where is this heading? I feel like there has to be a big confrontation between Kyralia and the spies. And by big confrontation, I don't necessarily mean the whole guild gets involved, but I think at least Sonea gets involved. And I feel like this king that's, I think the king is like behind this poisoning of Ferrand. I'm wondering if he's in on some of this somehow. That maybe their enemy isn't who they thought their enemy was, but I don't really know enough yet. So, all right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, but thank you all very, very much for coming and hanging out and commenting and everything. Thank you, Ashley, for commissioning this. Next week, Tuesday, I will be doing another one of these episodes, to catch up, because there was a bit of a mix up with doing the, reservations. My apologies again to Ashley about that. These reservation systems are not really impressing me much. But yeah, I'm excited to be able to read more so soon. So I'm looking forward to Tuesday. All right, everybody. Thank you again so much for listening, and I will see you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.